I want to pivot, if I can, David, to Russia and this announcement from their defense minister, Andrei Belosov,
Yeah.
who is saying now that Russia has to prepare for war with NATO, as well as completing its war against Ukraine. The quote is, "The Ministry of Defense of Russia must be ready for any development of events, including a possible military conflict with NATO in Europe in the next decade." Can you speak to the temperature of that entire situation as Trump takes power?
Putin is on the verge of collapse. If the presidential election had turned out differently, and Kamala Harris had kept her promise that she was going to be much tougher on behalf of the Ukrainians, Putin would be defeated. He's run through all of his foreign reserves. He doesn't have any. His country has been reduced to things like barter. There's a deal I wrote about for DC Report where the Russians traded lentils for Pakistani potatoes. I mean, just the irony that Russia is importing potatoes to feed people. But they had to do it by barter. They couldn't do it with any cash. According to the military bloggers, the Institute of Study of War, a whole group of people who follow the war very carefully and are experts at this, the half-life of a newly sent Russian or North Korean soldier to the front is less than a month. 2 weeks to a month is what you're going to live. The North Korean soldiers that were sent have proven to be, surprise, surprise, utterly incompetent. Don't understand battlefield tactics. They only understand very strict orders. Walk 10 steps this direction. That's the level. And of course, in warfare, you need sergeants, which the Russian army doesn't have, because they're the ones who say, well, our mission is to take that hill. We can't go the way the colonel said. Let's go do this. They don't have that capacity. And yesterday or the day before, I think it was yesterday morning, the killing of the Russian general in charge of chemical and biological weapons, who had to have been deeply involved in the roughly 5,000 uses of chemical weapons in the battlefield in Ukraine. Chemical weapons under the treaty the Russians signed are illegal. Well, because of this war, I had to go back and study Russian role in war. And one of the things that becomes very clear is back to the era of the czars, the Russians never paid attention to propriety or law on war. They just did whatever they damn well felt like. And so yesterday, a motor scooter was parked near the front of the building where this general in charge of chemical weapons lived. He comes out with his driver/bodyguard, and it blows up. His picture's on the screen, and kills both of them. Now, he's an absolutely legitimate target. I mean, killing other officers, that's warfare. Putin has made it clear there will be a response, and my guess is it will be I'm guessing here, I could be wrong, don't be surprised if they use chemical weapons on civilians. Wow. The risk in that is the rest of the world and the NATO countries will heighten their resolve against this war of aggression that's completely illegitimate. Even it's argued theory for it that Ukraine is part of the mother country of Russia, because the mother country is Ukraine. Russia is the child country. It is not going to stand up. So what the defense ministry now is trying to do is frighten Trump and get Trump to proceed with his promise to either withdraw from NATO or cut off any help to Ukraine. Because if they don't do that, the Russians can't sustain this. They have used up, we've spent 5% of our military budget, and we've destroyed way over half of the Russian war-making material. They're using tanks that were packed in Greece and put out in storage yards from the 1960s and 70s. And of course, those are not effective weapons in the battlefield.
The Ukrainians... If this is true, though, that Russia is teetering this way, and I would certainly say geopolitically, with the changes in the Middle East, the fall of Assad, that hurts Russia. And
very deeply.
So you do see this weakness being played out even in their tentacles that extend into the Middle East and these other conflicts that they're part of.
Putin was always said was there were people who said he's a great tactician. Well, maybe, but he's a terrible strategist. Tactics is the smaller stuff, strategy is the big stuff. He clearly is a terrible strategist. I mean, he actually thought his army was going to just overtake Ukraine, and he didn't count on two things. One, the senior Ukrainian officers weren't trained in Moscow. There's not a single one that was trained in Moscow. They were trained at Sandhurst in Britain and in France and in West Point and places like that. And they don't have rigid doctrines. They came up with incredibly smart combat tactics that are going to be taught at the U.S. Military War College in Pennsylvania for 500 years at least. I mean, this will be a very studied war on how did they hit back. And Putin didn't have the resources, the money, the morale. He didn't have anything he needed to make this succeed. And he's only been successful as long as he has because the West, particularly Joe Biden, were very tepid and cautious about the aid that they gave the Ukrainians. If we had started off day one saying, hey, here's 16 F-16 jet fighters and tons of other equipment, particularly artillery, the war, I think, would have been over a year ago.
How do you think it's going to play out?
Well, it depends on what Trump does. Trump may not fulfill Vladimir Putin's wishes. Why
do you say that, David? He seems so disposed to do that.
Because whatever else Donald is, at the end of the day, he's feral. When he feels threatened, he changes. And he doesn't do what he said he was going to do if he thinks it's better off if he doesn't. And so just letting... if he just simply says, I'm not going to give another dollar to help. And by the way, we're not giving dollars to the Ukrainians. A tiny fraction of what we've sent is money, maybe 5% of it. We're hiring Americans to build weapons, which we then give away. So you can argue that it's a job creation program in the U.S. If Trump realizes that if he pulls back, the French and the Germans and the Poles and the Italians are going to step up and fill in our role, which is what's being heavily discussed right now, especially in Germany, which is the dominant economic force in the EU. That may alter his behavior because he's going to look bad if he refuses and everybody else succeeds and then Russia loses. So he's going to have to think this through. Now, if it's Hegseth advising him, God only knows what will happen because the guy was a captain. You're going to make him head of the U.S. military and he was a captain?
Yeah.
So we don't know what'll happen, but you should not be surprised if Donald doesn't just say, hey, Putin, go do whatever the hell you want, which is what he said in the past when he was president and after he was president. Just don't be surprised if that's what happens. And in the meantime, the Ukrainians now, they are building larger and more sophisticated drones, which cost very little money. You know, if we didn't have pilots in our jet fighters, we could build them for a tenth of the cost of what they are, maybe less than that. They are very smartly using and then moving immediately mobile artillery units. So they go in, they set up, they shoot off as fast as they can, they take it down, they hightail it out of there before the Russians can get their weapon returned on them. And they're motivated to win. That's not true of the troops from North Korea. It's not true of the criminals they're letting out of the prisons. And you'd have to be a really stupid Russian. And generally, Russians are pretty sophisticated about what's going on around them because of the society they live in, to not recognize that people are dying left and right. You're not getting anywhere.
Yeah, of course, the story from their defense minister is, we're recruiting so many people every day. We just, we can't put enough uniforms on people. There's such a demand to take this territory back.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.